Hello, and welcome to SCG Global Spin. Our host today is Patrick Heid. Patrick is a partner at GvW Graf von Westphalen and is based out of their Shanghai office. His practice focuses on corporate M&A and capital markets. He is a member of many organizations, including the International Bar Association and the Inter-Pacific Bar Association, and he's fluent in German, English, French, and Chinese. Joining Patrick today is Shivpriya Nanda. Shivpi is a partner at Sagar Associates, and with over 3 decades of experience, she is one of the top commercial lawyers in India and a co-chair of the corporate practice at her firm. Shivpi has been ranked one of the leading lawyers by Legal 500, IBLJ, and Chambers, and her views have been published across industry journals and mainstream media.
Can you give us a bit of an overview of how the situation has been developing over the past months and where you stand in terms of the outbreak of the epidemic and fighting it?
Sure. So I'll just give you, do a quick take you through a quick rundown of what happened. So 23rd of March was when the lockdown was declared in India, which meant basically everyone was staying at home and nothing was open other than literally only grocery stores were open and nobody was allowed to go out of the houses, etc. And, through that phase of the first 2 months, we had not so many cases. And, because of the economic situation and the impact it's had on businesses, on, especially small businesses, workmen, people who literally, earn daily on the basis of whatever they do, the government then has been gradually opening up everything. So as of now, pretty much everything is open, of course, with all the social distancing and all those, qualifications in terms of sanitization and how much space you have to have between people. So that's there, but everything is open. Schools and colleges have not opened. And then, of course, the gatherings are limited in terms of how many people can sort of be together. But, in a populous country like India, where every time you go out on the shop, there are like thousands of people around, it's very difficult to manage. And, the enormity of the problem for India is really, we are a nation of more than 1.4 billion people. And so if you compare the rate of about 1 million infections with 1.4 billion plus people, then you can say that per 1,000 rate is still comparatively much lower than other countries. But yes, the number of infections that we are having now has been increasing significantly as of the last about month or so. So yeah, so in terms of where it will take us, whether we'll attain herd immunity, when will the vaccine come, are all questions that we Indians are, dealing with as much as any other nation is. Our problems are a little different because it's just the sheer number of people. But, I would still say that given the kind of infrastructure that India has, given the number of people the medical teams have handled things pretty well. And I think that first stretch of lockout, though it was, there is arguments for and against it, did have a significant impact on the economy, but it did help in terms of, sort of giving the medical facilities time to breathe and sort of rearrange themselves.
Right. How are people coping with the restrictions? I feel that, in particular, sitting here in Asia, but hailing from a Western country myself, I think there is a sensible difference, at least how East Asians handle those restrictions compared to Europeans, who are usually very impatient and are putting their personal freedom forward, while at least East Asians are usually taking this quite, let's say, serenely and do accept these restrictions as a certain must do. How do Indians cope with that?
So I would say that now, even in India, people are getting impatient. It's been close to 6 months that, people have been pretty much inside the houses. In terms of when you talk about productivity, uh, if you're used to being out of the office, and in the Indian context, especially, I'm saying, where most people, have some kind of help coming in to, assist in, could be in cleaning, could be in cooking, and suddenly all of that, you're not used to doing it, and you have to do all of that. It takes a lot of retraining to do in terms of how to manage your time. If I know that in the West, most people are used to it, right? But in India,
Right.
where most of the cooking is done from scratch, right? If you're cooking from, everything is freshly prepared. It's very little pre-cooked or even pre-prepared. So it's not like, so if you have to cut the vegetables, I'm getting into mundanities, but it sets the context, right? So even if you have to chop the vegetables, you will mostly not get chopped vegetables, right? You have to bring the vegetables, you have to clean them, you have to chop them. So it's a pretty long-winded process. So I think that has thrown a lot of people, a bit, because just managing an Indian food tends to be quite elaborate.
Yeah. That's very interesting to hear you say that, because that's very much something that I have experienced over the 10 plus years that I've been living in China, because my Chinese colleagues and friends always make fun of me and say, you Europeans might be very sophisticated in certain areas, but you're certainly not when it comes to cooking, at least not to everyday cooking, maybe to fine dining, but not to everyday cooking. And that's right. I think the Chinese approach to cooking is very much similar to what you have described for India. Everything has to be fresh and has to be sourced at the same day in the local markets, and you have a lot of ingredients in there. And it's not like a Western dish where you have whatever, some potatoes and then some vegetables and then
it goes into an oven and you don't have to think about it.
Exactly. Some meat or fish that is grilled, or it goes in the oven, and then after half an hour everything is you've cooked a dinner for 4, 5 or 6 person. Yeah, that's an interesting observation. Now let me ask, in terms of your clients, I would suppose, because that's what we have seen here and we also see in Europe, that they face the same challenges that you do as a firm. How did that translate in terms of workload? Do you still see the same amount of activity by your clients in their respective markets, and then the same amount of demand for legal services? And if so, if it's the same volume wise, has that shifted in terms of legal areas? What would you say?
So I think, if I may say so, touch wood, we have so far been quite lucky, Patrick. At a firm level, we haven't seen a significant downturn, so to say, in terms of amount of work. So it's been pretty much, business as usual. What we've seen is that the kind of work has changed.
Mm.
You're getting much, instead of getting a lot of transactions to do, whether they were private equity or others. So India has had some large transactions, and we've done some large ones in terms of investments in a new telecom company that, the Googles and Microsofts and everyone seems to have invested in this particular, it's really a behemoth. Reliance is the name of the company. So we've seen, interesting transactions there, but we've also seen that, so the PE, activity is definitely slowed down. The strategic investments have slowed down, but there is other kind of work. There's more advisory work, right? There's more distressed assets related work. So disputes, for instance, while, for all other kinds of disputes, since the hearings were not happening, right? Physical hearings were not happening. Most cases were just getting deferred. But there has been a decent amount of work coming in for our regulatory practice. So regulatory disputes are doing quite well, right? Arbitration again has not been such an issue. So it's balanced, sort of the work kind has changed, but quantity has not changed significantly.
Right, and is that also true for your foreign clients? I mean, I understand that there's less in fresh investments, but those who are already invested, offshore companies, do they also have this similar demands that they restructure their business, or they need employment law related advice or regulatory advice?
So
or is that only true for your Indian
we've
clients?
given a fair amount of employment law advice because, of course, there's been downsizing and there's been, all the issues of working from home, downsizing, permissions required. For instance, in India, I'm mindful that, we are at 629, but we'll continue. So in India, you have a lot of business process outsourcing units, which have a lot of telecom restrictions. So in terms of how and from where access to telecom infrastructure can be obtained. So there were a lot of advisory around that, privacy, digitization related advice. So clients have moved in terms of, so in terms of our work, obviously it follows the client. So it's really the demand from the clients to focus, the questions are coming more on the employment side, digitization, distressed assets, as I said, on the telecom side, opinion related work. And of course, clients, some clients are of course keenly looking at picking up cheaper assets which were overpriced earlier, and now the prices are much more realistic.
Would that be something that you, if a forecast is anything that you can reliably do at this stage, but that may actually bring, in particular, foreign investors back to India once the worst of this crisis has been weathered? Would you feel that companies are basically just maybe pausing their investments and waiting for better times to come, but are gearing up and being ready to then invest in whatever greenfield activity or asset acquisition? Is that something you would expect for the future?
So, Patrick, this is really a complicated question of economics and politics together, right? So there is, of course, as you may be aware, the geopolitical situation between India and China right now is not great, right? There are certain tensions that external affairs ministers have both met, that's there. So, that will also, for India, that will also impact. The government has, in May announced a package, an incentive package, which was to the tune of 10% of the GDP. And it is aimed at various sectors. So it's aimed at, medium scale enterprises, labor, small shop owners, or, what is called pavement sort of businesses, eateries, small eateries, all of that. And there are various laws also which are changing. So if you look at the Indian context, India had started the process of law reforms on tax side, on labor, on all of that. And this sort of, this pandemic has hit bang in the middle of it. The government is continuing with those initiatives. And some of those initiatives, as rightly implemented sensibly, will create, and also again, it depends upon how much of the impetus, or the funds which have been allocated to provide incentives actually go into the right pockets at the right time. That is very important. So that if all that happens in the right form, given that India has, a large consumer base, it is likely that companies will get attracted. The most important thing is that the Indian government should be able to tackle the concerns of foreign investors that, approvals take too much of time and there are delays. If that is sorted, I think we will see more investment coming into the manufacturing hubs in India.
Right. That's because you mentioned that yourself. I dare to ask you, how is the political situation evolving? I remember when the Modi government came into place, there were very high hopes, I believe, in India and also outside of India, and he was clearly branded himself and seen as a reformist. And I believe in his first years, he did quite a tremendous amount of reform work. From the outset perspective, it seems that this has stalled a little bit over the past years. How would you see that right now? Is it gaining traction again? Will the Modi government last for a few more years, or is there time for change coming up?
So my prediction really is, since you asked me, and it's a prediction, so don't hold me to it, Patrick. My prediction is that he's going to last, because contrary to what you hear in a lot of news items, the general population has benefited, right? So if I speak to people who who help out with my cooking and my cleaning in my house, right? They have families back home in villages, right? Things like they didn't have, toilets. They didn't have, they had mud houses, right? Those things have changed for them. They didn't have cooking gas. That's changed for them. So you may not see it in more sort of, more overt economic sectors, like, the automobile sectors where the car sales increase. It is very obvious that, spending is taking place and therefore people are earning and therefore the economy is doing well, right? That's the logical conclusion. These are not really overt, areas where you see spending, right? So it's a huge country with a lot of problems which have to be dealt with. So it will take time. It's not something that can happen overnight. But if you ask me whether he'll come back, I'd say there's a huge likelihood of it. Also, the second reason is that there is nobody in the opposition, right? The opposition is so fragmented. There's nobody who can, there's no strong candidate to be put up by any other party again.
That's interesting. And indeed, I was not aware of anyone who would appear as a prominent figure in the Indian opposition, but it's always worth confirming that by someone who, like you, who's living on the ground. Going back and maybe finishing off to the economic landscape, what do you expect for the next, let's say, 6 to 12 months to happen, both in terms of the economy and also in terms of your firm? Is there any trend that you would see? Is India and your firm basically just waiting, as so many others, that the situation is being under control and we all go back to normal? Or would you expect actually another trend to set in and something that lasts from that crisis?
So from the Indian economy perspective, I'd say that, we've just recently, it's become sort of public knowledge that the Indian economy has dipped by 23% of its GDP. Now that's really significant, right? For India to recover in any meaningful way, I would say it would take a minimum of 2 years. So I would say the recovery would sort of start for India in 2022. That's my prediction. It is not, it's not as, I'm not coming here as an economist. So that's my prediction, that the recovery for India will start from 2022. As far as the law firms are concerned, there has been a challenge because not much hiring has happened. So that's a sad state of affairs for the kids who are who've passed out from law colleges this year. A lot of them have not got jobs. So I think a lot of firms are sort of stepping up and seeing what they can do about that. For instance, in my firm, I've taken the initiative, with the firm's permission, of course, of setting up a separate online system where I will hire these young lawyers as researchers, and try and reach out to corporates, and to be pretty much like a contributory service. There's no fixed fee or anything. It's just so that they keep learning, and it's not like this year is not a dead loss for them. And and there are other things that certainly our law firm has done, our law firm partners have done, that they've decided to cut back on what their monthly amount that they were taking home by about 60%, so that we keep having that buffer should things really get worse. Touch wood, knock on wood. We haven't seen that still, but you have to be agile and you have to plan. So as far as the firm's planning is concerned, we are certainly focusing on certain sectors more, sectors which really clearly have, we've seen that there'll be more work in those sectors now and in the next couple of years: healthcare, technology, as I said, distressed assets. We've seen some growth in the defense sector also, and FMCG. So there are certain sectors, and if the government's plan of what they call Atmanirbhar Bharat, or self-sufficient India, really sees the light of day, then manufacturing will be another area which will bring a fair amount of work.
That sounds very promising, at least maybe not for the too immediate future, but hopefully for the midterm future. Shivpriya, thank you very much. That was highly interesting, and as I said in the beginning, even though I'm personally also located in Asia, this is a huge continent, and what happens in India in terms of the COVID epidemic, in terms of the economy, law firms, development, and politics is something that you still don't really grasp if you are not living and working in that country. So I think that was hugely insightful. Thank you so much for taking your time this evening with me and with us, and I look forward to getting an update again, whenever time is ripe, from how India and you
are. Absolutely.
And to seeing you again, hopefully in person and in good health at the very next occasion.
Thank you so much, Patrick, for your very incisive questions and interesting questions. I absolutely enjoyed myself talking with you. And a big thank you to the SCG team, Kate and Diane, for bringing us together for this very, very interesting conversation. Thank you, and good night. Bye, Patrick.
And that concludes our recording. Thank you for joining us today. You can find this and many other episodes at scgglobalspin.com.